with John and Scully. Scully's prepared for the polar vortex that we're experiencing, and for those of you that participate, please enjoy your championship Sunday. Today we'll be talking about levator scapula, going over origin, insertion, action, innervation, and blood supply. Thanks for joining. Alright, so today we'll be talking about the levator scapula. Bring Scully a bit closer here. We'll be going over the origin first. Okay, turn this around. Yeah, unfortunately, Scully, we have to get rid of that hat so you can see the spine. Football probably doesn't help either. Alrighty, so the origin, as you'll see above, we're looking at Scully's right side of the cervical spine. We are going to be originating on the posterior tubercles of the transverse processes of the cervical spine from C1 all the way down to C4. So C1 is easy to see the transverse process right in through there. But then as we come down, transverse process of C2 sits about right here. And then C3 right there. And then C4. And again, they're just going to be just posterior to the nerve root exit. So that's how we know that's the transverse process right in through there. So that is the origin of the levator scapula. Posterior tubercles of the transverse processes of C1 to C4. Now let's zoom out a bit. Looking at the insertion of levator scapula. So the insertion, as above, is going to be on the medial aspect of the scapula of the superior angle extending to the spine. So tucked in right through here. So it was going from here up and through there. So once again, it's on the medial aspect of the scapula at the superior angle and extending to the spine of the scapula. And that is the insertion of levator scapula. Moving on to action. Acting bilaterally, it helps to extend the cervical spine. It also helps to elevate the scapula medially. Also, it helps to downwardly rotate the scapula by tilting when it pulls up to the medial aspect of the scapula and downwardly rotate that scapula. In the Netter text, it refers to that as inferior rotation of the glenoid cavity. Just a strange way to say downward rotation of the scapula. It's also going to help us to ipsilaterally side bend and rotate the cervical spine when working unilaterally. So that is the action of levator scapula. Moving on to innervation. Once again, looking at Scully's right scapula. It's going to receive innervation from the dorsal scapular nerve. Dorsal scapular nerve is going to be coming from the C4 and C5 nerve roots off the brachial plexus. And remember, in the C-spine, nerve roots exit above until we get to that pesky C8 nerve, which we can go over in another video. But if we count down cervical vertebrae 1, 2, 3, and then 4. So here's C4, and exiting above will be the nerve root, okay? And then so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, exiting above will be C5 nerve root. So there's your two nerve roots that are going to supply innervation traveling down to the dorsal scapular nerve to the levator scapula. Levator scapula also receives innervation from the ventral rami of C3 and C4. So once again, we have the dorsal scapular nerve coming off of C4, C5, off of brachial plexus. Then we also have innervation from the ventral rami of C3 and C4. Last but not least, blood supply. So blood supply is going to come from three major arteries for levator scapula. The first one is going to be the dorsal scapular artery. Again, you might be noticing a trend. This artery, there's some debate in the literature whether it originates from the subclavian artery or this thyrocervical trunk. So it could be either. But again, so we have more often than not, it is the subclavian artery, but the second most reported is the thyrocervical trunk. So, subclavian artery, it's coming around through here just above the first rib, and it will be supplying, again, either off the subclavian artery, it'll go up to this thyrocervical trunk and come down to supply the dorsal scapular artery, or it'll just be directly off the subclavian artery. So that's the first artery we'll talk about. The second one is going to be the transverse cervical artery, which we talked about with the trapezius. This time we're going to be talking about the descending branch of the transverse cervical artery. So that one is coming off of the thyrocervical trunk, and that's going to be coming down and providing blood supply to the Levator Scapulae off of the subclavian artery to the thyrocervical trunk to the Levator Scapulae here with the descending aspect of the transverse cervical artery. Lastly, because remember the origin up here in the upper neck, is going to be the ascending cervical artery. So that one also is going to be coming off of the thyrocervical trunk, and it's going to, instead of going down towards the insertion, it's going up towards the origin of the Levator Scapula. So there you have it. Origin, insertion, action, innervation of the Levator Scapula. As always, there will be a still frame at the end of the video with all of those aspects outlined here. It's going to be featuring my discus cichlids today. And as always, do not forget to eat your leafy greens, and happy Championship Sunday. Take care, folks.